Well, hi everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Feeling Smarter. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Tim Miller. G'day, Tim. How are you?
Yeah, going pretty well, Aaron. How are you doing?
Not too bad, thank you.
Good.
Well, this week we're going to go back to a topic that we explored probably 16 or so months ago, and that is around the concept of a death benefit being treated as a death benefit, or rather, is it a member benefit? And this is probably, other than the question of dependency, is probably one of the most common things we see from a private binding ruling perspective, both within APRA but also within self-managed super funds. And I think, Tim, it's fair to say the ATO, in terms of their guidance from these rulings, have pretty much got a black and white model going between how they deal with APRA funds versus self-managed super funds.
Yeah, look, I guess it's reasonable to say that. I think we've sort of always adopted that approach, particularly when we look historically at the private binding rulings that have been issued before. And whilst the ATO have some commentary on their website about it, or have had some commentary on their website about it, they've listed a number of factors that they take into consideration when determining whether something is a member or death benefit. And I guess the caveat to all this is where generally a request is made before somebody passes away, but then due to variations of circumstances, the benefit isn't paid until after the person has passed away. And so the ATO's position has historically been for self-managed super funds, one of those determinations or ruling requests that you've mentioned there, being that because of the knowledge of the SMSF trustee that the member has passed at the time of the payment, the result have always traditionally been that they are death benefits versus an APRA fund, where often the trustee is not aware necessarily when processing the request that the member has actually passed away.
Yeah, so that, and I guess this is the reality of it, where the closely held nature of a SMSF trustee member relationship, family nucleus, you're going to know from knowledge, in essence, that that individual has died, and hence why I made that comment about black or white. And however, and I guess this is why we're here today, is it's the first time that we've probably seen that tinge of grey when it comes to an SMSF death benefit PBR. And interestingly, whilst knowledge was there in respect to this, we kind of had to look outside of the nine dots to understand why the ATO ultimately took that position, and very much demonstrated that it was outside of the control of the trustees in being able to make that payment in a timely fashion, that ultimately came to the conclusion that it was a member benefit in those circumstances. So I might get you, therefore, to elaborate on this and highlight, I guess, the things here that kind of stood out as opposed to what we have seen historically in the SMSF space with these PBRs.
Yeah, so this was an interesting one, and I mean the facts of the self-managed super fund themselves are not overly interesting, other than you had the member who was also a director of the corporate trustee, and clearly, and you know how these private binding rulings go, they put a lot of X's and Y's and Z's in. They don't give you all the full details of the number of trustees, a number of, or the dates that things occur. They kind of blank a lot of that out, but clearly there was multiple members, family members in the fund, and they were all directors of the corporate trustee. So there was a large number. It wasn't just a single member fund. Um, Importantly, they also had a look. I'm going to say a family trust for the sake of the ruling, because it's not clear. But let's assume it was a family trust. And the member, he made a decision whilst alive. They had the self-managed super fund had one significant investment in a private, unrelated entity, and he made a decision to transfer the units from that to the family trust. So because he had met a conditional release, so he was over 65, had unrestricted non-preserved benefits, went down the path of going, I'd like to do a benefit payment and transfer my units out of the super fund. Now, of course, he's made a direction to pay it to the family trust, but it's still a benefit to him in those circumstances. That request was made to the trustees of the fund. The trustees of the fund all agreed with that. They then went and approached effectively the investment manager, so the unrelated party, and they went through the redemption process. And this is where it became interesting, because the redemption process has effectively had like an information memorandum as to how you went through any redemption. And effectively, because these were unlisted investments, they went through quarterly valuations. And so you had to put a request in 45 days prior to the next valuation date. So any request that was made, less than that 45 days before the next valuation date would follow into the next quarter, right? So you had a valuation date of let's call it the 30th of June, 30 September, 31 December, and then 31 March.
Yeah.
They're your valuation dates, and effectively then you had redemption dates being the day following that, right? So you had quite strict rules in regards to how the redemptions could be made. So the trustee company made a request to the investment company. The investment company acknowledged the request and acknowledged the valuation date as the upcoming end of quarter date, and therefore they also acknowledged the redemption date. Now, interestingly, also in the information memorandum, it was once requested, only the investment manager could decide not to pay a benefit out. So effectively, once the ball's in motion, it couldn't be stopped, right?
Yep.
And so days prior to the redemption date, the member had passed away. And so whilst all parties knew, including the investment manager, the payment was in process and the transfer was done. So of course, what do? They ask the ATO, is this a death benefit or is it a member benefit? And ultimately in this one, because of all of those circumstances that I've just outlined, the ATO determined that it was a member benefit, because despite the knowledge that the member had passed away, the trustee was powerless to stop the payment, and as such, it was just following its natural course of the request that the member made.
Yeah, and we start to see this as a common theme within other areas of SMSFs around the way in which the ATO will tackle things. Because of the closely held nature of SMSFs, a lot of it falls back to whether the decision that happens at that point in time or happens next ultimately needs to be outside of the control of the trustee. So we look at discretion around minimum pensions, for example, and yes, there's a 1/12 shortfall concession, but once you're kind of beyond that, to be able to get the continuity of that income stream, you need to be able to prove that it was outside of the control of the trustee in terms of being able to have that pension continue. So it kind of this is another example here whereby knowledge is relevant, but also the only way in theory you're going to really get any extension or any consideration of this beyond the fact that it's a death benefit is that you would need to be able to demonstrate that you've now gone outside of the control of the decision making that the trustee has, and therefore, as you kind of said, you're beholden to someone else now. In this instance, it was based upon the procedural aspects of the deed and the investment manager in determining the valuation to enable that benefit to occur.
Yeah, and look, and I think there's one other really interesting point to come out of this one, and that is that another topic that that I suspect we'll cover off and soon with the finalisation of TR 2010-1, the contribution ruling, because we've always had a great interest in this concept of beneficial versus legal ownership, which is dealing with the execution of off-market transfer forms. And what was interesting in this one was that the unit trust transfer form, so effectively the off-market transfer form, was executed on the initial date, so when the member signed it. And so that would be, and also acknowledged ultimately, when you reference all historical ATO references about things like transfer forms, that would seem to be the date of the benefit payment. But because, again, of the information memorandum, the ruling was that the date of the payment was, in fact, the day after the valuation date, which is the redemption date based on the actual investment vehicle itself. So, it's really important then that people understand the process they're going through if they're looking to do anything other than a cash payment. that they understand the process they're going through from a timing point of view, from an execution point of view, and all those sorts of elements.
Yeah, and equally, I guess we're going to see more and more of these sort of in specie type transactions, and where we're going to be dealing with some other interposed entity or entity that
Yep,
that may have to go through procedural a procedure that in essence will need to determine, how that benefit is paid out or how that benefit is changed in ownership and so forth. So understanding, and probably when these applications go through, if you don't look at those other aspects, well, then the ATO will most likely fall back into that default position. So understanding the other entities involved in this and understanding what the processes are in those entities are going to be equally as important as well.
absolutely, absolutely.
So, all right. Well, thank you once again, Tim. Always a pleasure to have you, share your pearls of wisdom on
Well,
our
look, I always
Smart.
enjoy it, and what I look forward to is looking at future procedural procedures, Aaron, because I'm pretty sure every procedure is procedural, and
Yes.
so I look forward to that for any process we might have in the future.
Absolutely. We'll make sure we get a procedure put around that as well. So,
Terrific.
all right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of
Yes.
the week, and bye for now.
Bye.